Hi guys, Marika Rancy, or as most of you know me, Political Posting Mama. This video is one that you've all been asking about. The start of the school year, I get lots and lots of questions about certain things happening, people trying to find information, and this is information about a program called Resilience, Rights and Respect for Relationships. I will post all the content above or below the video link here. And so you can actually have a look at that curriculum for yourself. But there's a lot to go through. So I've broken it down and I'm going to go through some of the more controversial topics because some of the content's quite good. And, the reality is your kids, when they come home from school, what do they say? You say, how was your day? They say, good. And you say, what did you learn? And they say, nothing, right? Most of them aren't going to come home and tell you what's going on. And most of us don't have necessarily the time to go through the curriculum and have a look at it all. And many of us trust that the schools have our children and they're taking care of them and that school's like it was for us when we were at school, right? Well, not so, because Resilience, Rights and Respect for Relationships has a component that deals with gender and identity. And this is where it's quite, I believe, quite controversial and where we need to start to speak with our principals. The reality is a lot of the time the principals are not even aware of all the curriculum because they're administrators. That's not their role to understand and read all the curriculum. So maybe print it out and go and take it to your principal, especially if you've got a reasonable, fair-minded one, and share your concerns. So in a video quickly though, these are some of the issues that we are of concern. So there's a promotion definitely of gender fluidity. So once again, that's the idea that we're seeing all throughout, with this transgender activism, that gender's fluid, that it's not binary, that it's not males and females, and that you can be any gender you want. And that they're teaching that little boys can be trapped in the wrong body, where they're actually girls, and little girls can be trapped in the wrong body as well. So that's part of this program. So it talks about doing explicit work with children to acknowledge, explore and celebrate diverse identities. So there's a real social engineering going on again with this program. That's what I would call it. So that's page 31. You can have a look at that on Foundation. There's a belief that gender norms and roles are socially constructed. So they're promoting this in the schools, that gender is not biological or psychological, that it's based on society's creation. So it talks about the limiting nature of many traditional gender norms. So it doesn't matter if you have a belief in your home that there are gender roles, and that's fine if you do. I mean, I actually do believe that mothers are mothers, and that they give birth to children, that women do that. And I believe that gender is that mostly binary for most of us. I do believe, and I've mentioned this before, I was a tomboy. I was someone who wanted to be a boy when I was a little girl. So if these programs were around when I was at school, I'm sure I would have been caught up in this mess and perhaps would have been a victim to this ideology that they're certainly pushing at everywhere we turn. And we can turn our TVs off, but when you're sending them to school and the teachers have access to their minds, look, most teachers are probably fair-minded, but I would suggest that there are political zealots within the school system, and they certainly are pushing an agenda, and here's part of this agenda is in this program. So it encourages teachers to select literature for the classroom that includes stories that challenge stereotypes, reflect the diverse families and roles within the community. So, for example, they could be promoting the Gender Fairy book. It doesn't actually list it that I can see, but there's select books, and they could go to the Safe Schools resources, I'm sure, and they have quite interesting topics there. So the Gender Fairy, is a well-known book that has been out in the public where, anyway, it's quite controversial. But so they are encouraged to read these books. It talks about what approach do you take to enable children from same-sex families to feel comfortable to talk about who is in their family. So does your school's anti-bullying or diversity policy specifically include harassment or discrimination based on sexuality, gender diversity or intersex status? So that's there. That's Foundation page 37. And it suggests reading gender diverse stories to the class. So this is primary school, so we're talking any age from prep on. We've got working with children to know and name the main external parts of the body. So they need to know penis, vulva, breast and buttocks, for example. And that's from prep on, and that can be any teacher any time through these resilience, rights, respect for relationships. And scarily, it encourages the resource Catching On Early, which is a sexuality program based on the work of Alfred Kinsey, the sexual revolutionist whose whose research was pedophile research. You can look that up, the Kinsey Institute. I've posted many times on that before. And this is what Catching On Early is based on, and it comes from the same the same department, I should say, that the Safe Schools program came from. So we have, promotion of pedophile ideology in research papers from some of the academics in this department. That's been named in Parliament. I won't name names at this time, but that's all certainly information that's out there as well. So that's Catching On Early, and that's promoted through this program. So even if you say, no, there's no safe schools at my school, if you have resilience, rights and respect for relationships, you've got elements of what's known as the Safe Schools program, which has come from, developed by a Marxist ideology really, but comes really from the sexual revolution. Basically we'll go through level 1 and 2. So we introduce the word gender. So they have to explain that gender can change over time. It talks about what different families look like. So does it always have to be a mother or father? So this is, remember, prep on grade 1 and 2, level 1 and 2. So teach children that sometimes children are looked after by 2 female parents or 2 male parents. So if that's a topic that you may have not addressed with your children yet, that will be addressed at school, you bigots. Anyway, level 3 and 4, we use the word sex to talk about the different bodies that people are born with. So this is, they're breaking up the notion, they're teaching them that sex is very different to gender, and that gender is fluid, sexuality can also be fluid. Also some different ideas about how boys and girls or men and women should behave, like how they should dress or what they should be doing. These differences do not come from their body parts. They are more likely differences in fashion because they can change over time and they can change from one place in the world to another. The word for these differences is gender. So this is how they introduce gender fluidity. They let them know what gender is and explain it with this theory that I believe should be discussed as a theory at university, but this is happening in level 1, 2, 3 and 4. And that's all on page 66. You can look that up, 55, 56, 66, the things that I've talked about. Children to understand the difference between the inherent biological differences between the sexes, and then they're taught that it's about social and cultural differences. They benefit from critical thinking exercises within which they detect and challenge the limiting nature of many traditional gender norms, right? Now they've got classroom activities, and this is where it gets pretty frightening. I'm going to try and keep this video as short as I can. There's a lot to get through, but basically to challenge the stereotypes. So they teach them the word that it's important to, students are familiar with the basic vocabulary needed to understand sexual orientation and gender identity. So then it talks about how students who don't conform are obviously far more bullied than any other children is what they teach them. And that's level 5, 6, page 66. We've got level 7 and 8, so year 7 and 8. There is a third gender called transgender. Okay, transgender means the sex a person is assigned at birth does not match the gender they identify as. So this is part of resilience, rights and respectful relationships to teach them about transgenderism. And it goes on. So if you want to look that up, that's page 63. And then it talks about how being transgender is different to being gay, and talks about gay sexuality. And anyway, so that's year 7, and that's not through the sexual education component, that's through resilience, rights, respect for relationships. So then it talks about the rights of transgender or third gender people. And it goes into how you can change your gender on birth certificates or passports. And that is true in Victoria and Queensland and other states, that you can actually change your gender, not just male or female, but any gender you want, and this is legally correct, every 12 months. So we also have a practical guide to love, sex and relationships. This is recommended as a resource, and it includes such topics as what a respectful and ethical romance looks like. Maybe you assume that that this is important and for them to know, but remember who this has been outsourced to, and do they match the people that have put together this curriculum? Does their ethos and family values and sexual ethics match yours? Because I would suggest that a lot of the academics that have put this stuff together would be on the fringe and not mainstream, but that's just my suggestion, but I would certainly be looking that up. It has animated videos. How do people learn what they enjoy sexually? That's what they're asked. And then they're given some animated videos. I'm not sure what those are. There's also a video on porn, what you should know. Now, I'm very passionate with my own children in protecting them against the dangers and the harm of porn. The reality is that children have access to pornography. Anyone who has a device, it's in their pocket. And so it can flash up for kids. And this is something that as parents, it's a real war on our children. But where I'm concerned is that, firstly, I'm not sure what animated videos they're showing. But what I did discover when I was researching the Safe Schools program was that one of the resources that was recommended was a resource called Scarletine. This is an American website. And the creator of that website is actually a porn actress. So, or actor, if we're going to be politically correct, I'm not sure, but female maybe identifies as female. Porn actress. So basically that's Scarletine, and this is the website that I exposed where they promote masturbation using household devices. So I don't trust this, and I would be asking a lot of questions as to what they're actually going to be teaching about porn and what they should know, because I'm very much of the view that children should be protected. Okay, level 9 and 10. The topics on gender for levels 9 and 10 are contained in units 1 and 2. And so it talks about when is the right time, includes the advice. While being sexual with someone is a clumsy term, I'm choosing it as a device. Okay, so to highlight that there may not only be discussing sexual intercourse. So, okay, our discussions about having sex or feeling pressured to have sex are relevant to a range of sexual activities such as deep kissing, sharing sexual images, anal sex, oral sex, or genital touching. Remember, they denied the teaching and promotion of anal sex. Well, it is happening and it's in this program. You can look it up for yourself. That's to be taught as part of resilience, rights, and respect for relationships. Okay. Now, we've got role plays here, and I talked about this. So this is a potentially sensitive activity because students are playing roles that involve talking about behaviours or situations they could be uncomfortable with. And then it says, hence it's very important to know your students. Ensure that you have read the characters so you are aware of the issues covered and can inform the students of what the role play will cover. You might want to handpick the students to be involved in the activity depending on the confidence and experience of the students in undertaking the role plays. Make sure you have a safe environment and that students know they're going to be looking at sexuality, sexual behaviours and relationships. It's very useful to have an extra teacher. So then get an extra teacher to come in. It can be anyone, any teacher, drama teacher, maybe the school nurse. They get to pick, welfare coordinator, whoever can come in and join in on these sexual role plays with the 13 and 14-year-olds in the class. And some of the role plays, it actually talks about if the children become distressed during it. So to de-roll, you ask the student their real names and how they're feeling and where they are. You thank them by using their real names and let them return to their original chairs. This is important to ensure that none of the role players has slipped into a state of distress or disassociation. If anyone is a bit off or is clearly distressed, Ask them to step outside with you for a minute. This is after you've done your sexual role plays in the class and they're distressed now. You go outside with them and maybe give them some water. That's there as a recommendation, so you can have a look on page 85. There's a handout. They say there's no curriculum with Safe Schools, but there's definitely curriculum here. Here's a handout. There is curriculum and handouts with Safe Schools too, but anyway, it's another story. Page 116 describes the characters that the students are given to role play. Now, get this. No wonder a student might be feeling a little bit off when you look at some of the characters. You've got Kelly. Kelly's 14 in year 9 and is very interested in girls. She's not sure but thinks she might be a lesbian. She's had one relationship with a girl, but she's also been attracted to boys. Or then you've got Grace. Grace is 16 and in year 10. She's had 4 boyfriends and she's been sexually active since she was 13. The boy was 15 at the time, and although she was willing to have sex, she feels he took advantage of her. This has influenced her beliefs about sex. So this is a role play, and then you have a big open discussion with all the other 13 and 14-year-olds in the room about this. Then you've got Megan, who's 17. She's had 15 sexual partners and describes herself as a bisexual. She's had casual sex and some short-term partners, including 2 women. She rarely practices safe sex. She forgets to protect herself because she's often drunk when she has sex. Or let's be Jessie. Come on, boys. You're 14 and 15, but you're going to play Jessie. Jesse's an apprentice carpenter and he's watched quite a bit of pornography and learnt sex from what he's seen in it. He has had 5 sexual partners, including casual sex and sex with 2 of his girlfriends. He talks about how you pick up someone for casual sex and how there's very little direct communication about what is going to happen. Okay, then we've got another handout. This is page 53, 54. The handout is 19. That's what it's called. Scenario. So you can be a 15-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted by a close male friend when you were 13. Or you could be a 16-year-old girl who was sexually assaulted by her boyfriend. You're a 15-year-old boy who's been forced to give your uncle oral sex. This is in the Resilience, Rights and Respectful Relationships program, and your teacher could potentially be getting them to role play this in a group setting. Why on earth are students the age of 14 or 15 having these sorts of scenarios being thrust at them? Why not actually find out what they know in terms of their knowledge, because you're going to have varied views based on their sexual ethics and ethos and home environment and whether or not they've been sexually assaulted or abused. And I granted that is unfortunately very, very common, but there are also many kids that haven't been. And the kids that have been, that's just terrible in this group setting. This is something that should be dealt with in counselling as a private matter. This is crazy. This is part of the Resilience, Rights and Respect for Relationships, and I'm calling for it to be pulled out of the curriculum, and I would call on all of you to do the same thing. Please go to your school, print it out, and go and speak to your principal, especially if you've got a fair-minded principal. Stamp your feet, contact the Department of Education. We really, really have to push back. This isn't going to happen overnight. The reality is this has been like the frog in boiling water, and they have snuck this in, and you know what? Unfortunately, we've been complacent, and I know I was guilty of it myself. No more. I don't trust these people. I trust some of them, but you know, I don't trust those that have outsourced this kind of stuff to a fringe group of activists who are really interested in the sexual revolution and to push that. And are really, really stepping on parental rights. So share this video. I'm going to print out put the links up. Now, last time I did that with the Safe Schools, they broke the links. I have downloaded copies and I can repost it. But if they do that, I think it's quite telling, isn't it? They've now hidden the content of the Safe Schools program. It's gone underground. You can look up the federal link, which is the Student Wellbeing Hub, but it's very sanitised. But yeah, the fact that it's underground is of concern, because this stuff needs to be brought into the light. This should all be talked about in the light and openly, and with the inclusion of parents. So that's Resilience, Rights and Respect for Relationships. Please share my video. And for all the trolls who are going to hit me, because I know you will, I ban and block.